right, I'm just going to dive right in. My intent is to show you a role center for an accountant and then show you the chart of accounts, bank accounts, how we process payments, how we receive cash, um, talk about things like deferrals, and answer any questions you may have. Um,
Great.
you're looking at Business Central, and the role center I've invoked is that of not personalized, but my settings. The role center I've chosen is an accountant. So the system has like 140 predefined role centers, and those role centers change what displays on your screen, adding different menus across the top, and adding different tiles and chart parts to your view with quick access to the chart of accounts, bank accounts, customers, vendors. As I scroll down, I have an activity pane, and this is showing me overdue purchase documents, so things I have to pay, my balance in my cash account, and that's all of the accounts. So that's liquid right there on my dashboard. Incoming documents. So to automate the payables process, the system can import from a shared directory, or you can put them in manually, inbound documents, inbound purchase order confirmations, receipts of goods, or invoices that will be automatically entered against existing purchase transactions. Payments, so purchase docs due today, next week, and purchase discounts next week. So things I can take advantage of if I pay early. Each of these tiles, and if they're not useful for you, we can get rid of them. And you can choose to show or hide, but they're all drillable. So when I click on this, it's going to show me all those invoices that are all past due. And they're showing as red because they're past due with our vendor information and the invoice numbers. And as I scroll across the dollar amounts on those invoices, the remaining amount that's still open. You'll also notice here amount and then amount dollar sign, remaining amount, amount dollar sign. That's because the system supports multiple currencies. So if you only deal with US, you won't have two columns here. The due date, the discount date, the payment tolerance date. Is this a purchase that's 1099able that we're going to be paying filing a 1099 on? And I'll just escape back. But from all these tiles, we can drill. As I continue down, we've got a self-service area, probably not appropriate. That's for timesheet entry. We've got intercompany here. So if you've got multiple legal entities, the system is designed to do intercompany transactions, where a purchase in one becomes a due to is a due from in another entity. So you only enter the transaction in one company, and it will automate the creation of those transactions in the related companies. Also supports consolidation, reporting, eliminations. We find that many of our print clients have multiple entities, usually through acquisition, but they maintain that. And then they do a bunch of arm's length transactions between each other as they share project work. The system is designed to work electronically. Now you can print as much paper as you want. Being in the industry, that might be desirable. But as far as sending things with an email, isn't it nice to know, oh, these emails went, and you can drill down. So when you send a purchase order or you send an invoice out to the customer, or is it stuck in my outbox? Or did it fail because the email address was invalid? Approvals. So the system has workflow approval, everything from releasing a purchase order to adjusting a customer's credit limit to approving a journal entry that's been entered before it can be posted. And approvals are sent, and there is a whole approval workflow engine built into Business Central. E-document processing. So this is, from a perspective of importing documents for processing on the payable side, linking to purchase orders, or waiting to receive an electronic invoice from a supplier, as well as sending outbound e-documents. So if you have a purchase order that you're going to send electronically, they're managed directly on these tiles. Then if I look down further, key accounts. So you specify which GL accounts you want promoted to this insight view. Receivables, payables, the bank accounts. The key vendors you might be interested in, Even the columns that are displayed are totally up to you. As I continue down, financial performance, income and expenses by month, business performance, a cash cycle view, a cash flow forecast, where it gives us the breakdown and we can hover, and on all of these we can drill. And then Power BI. So Power BI reports can be part of your role center. So these are just examples. There are a whole bunch of pre-configured charts that you can choose to include, and we can edit the list of those that are available. But Microsoft has pre-embedded dozens of reports for you to include on your role center. So when we drill into, I'm going to start in the chart of accounts. And when I look at the chart, the chart structure looks pretty simplistic. This can be up to 20 characters long. It supports alphanumeric, but a lot of times when people are looking at the chart of accounts and you come down to like revenue, income from product sales, it's GL account 40,200. Well, what if I want to see my revenue or my costs by the type of products that we sold, or the type of customer that we did work for, or the salesperson, or the territory, or the region? In Business Central, those are called dimensions. And if we drill down into this $1,150,000, you'll notice that, yes, it's GL account 40,200. And we see the document number for those invoices where the revenue came from. But we also see a department, we see a customer group. And if I look at something called a dimension overview and show it as a matrix view, I also have territory, business group, customer group, department, purchaser, sales campaign, salesperson. These are called dimensions. So dimensions, we create a list of dimensions, and I'll go to dimensions. And right here, I'm using tell me what you want to do. And it searches the entire system. So you don't have to think about navigating by menu. And these are the dimensions in this sample company. But you would most likely have your item category. We have a term in Business Central called cost center. That's the machines that you're on your floor. So all the costs that are fed to each job or project are fed to the GL, so those expenses can be tracked down to the machine that ran that production. Territory, business group, customer group. And if you think about it, a lot of times people have a very detailed chart of accounts with unique account numbers for the revenue and the costs. And we're going to start doing another category. We're going to start printing for the military. And I want to track those jobs. So now I have to create a revenue account, a cost account. All I need to do is add a dimension value. So in my business group right here, I go ahead and I go to the dimension values and I add here military or government and now that's available with every GL account.
Right.
So makes it very powerful for getting any kind of analysis down to the level of detail of a customer, an individual job. So measuring profitability, doing financial performance and evaluation, dimensions are a super powerful thing. And it's usually one of the first things we talk about because the foundation of the product is the accounting. And when we talk with a business about, let's look at your chart of accounts, it's not usually a very streamlined cross-reference from the chart of accounts you're used to living with and what you can benefit from using the account number structure and using dimensions in Business Central. Let's take a look at bank. So when we set up our bank accounts, and there's this bank statement service. So we can link, and obviously you need to change banks. But when we process a transaction, we can link to online bank accounts. This provides a number of very important things. First of all, down on our bank transfer tab, we have a bank statement import format. And this is what we would choose when we can create a new one. And the system has a wizard to look at a file you've downloaded from the bank and determine what's the account number, what's the check number, what's the dollar amount to understand. But this allows us to do bank reconciliation electronically.
Yeah.
So you download from the bank, and you also, besides bank rec, if you receive a lot of payments electronically, many times a business process in the accounting department is, all right, let's log into the bank and look at all the ACH deposits, put them in it through a cash receipt process manually, as if you're receiving checks in the mail, and then figure out which customer paid you and what was the remittance information, which is oftentimes difficult to understand. Well, Business Central will also do that. So it'll download today's bank transactions and put them into a bank deposit. And if you've entered on your customer their bank account info, which you can do, there's a place for that, it will automate the allocation to the correct customer account. There's a payment export format. So we use this when we're exporting or transmitting to the bank electronic payments. So we can use the system to generate online bill pay, or we can do EFTs directly from our bank, directly from the payment journal. We also have a positive pay export format. So positive pay for fraud prevention. Anytime you're writing physical checks, the bank won't clear them unless you send them a ledger of it's this date, this bank account, this payee, this dollar amount. If it doesn't match, the bank won't process that transaction. Positive pay is built in, and EFT transfers are built into the software. So hopefully you get a bank that's rather standardized, that has some of these features, and Business Central
is much better.
If we take a look at, let's look at a vendor. So vendors and customers are set up in a very similar manner. Now I'm looking at what are called tiles. And when you look at a list of data, you can look at just a regular list. Here's my vendors. Or we can look at things as tiles or tall tiles, just depending on the same data is available. And when you click on a record, the fields on the right, this is called the info pane, shows the information about the row you're on. So many times where you drill down and then you go into the record to look at the detail, that information is available directly on screen, as well as all of their history. Any posted invoices, posted or open invoices, posted receipts of goods, posted invoices from this vendor. Now I can drill down and I'll go ahead and I'll bring up a vendor. And I can also see the data set on multiple tabs. So on my general tab, I see their vendor number, I see their name. I can drill down into that balance and it will show me what makes up this balance. So the invoices, the invoice numbers. If I wanted to see a specific invoice, I just click show document and it brings me directly to this where I can see, oh, I bought, 10 rolls of substrate from this vendor and the unit cost associated with that transaction, and I'll go ahead and escape back out. But being able to see those transactions, if I want to create a payment for this vendor, I can do that directly from the vendor ledger entries. If something's wrong and I want to make a reversal, you can't edit. This isn't QuickBooks. You can't open a transaction and change it because it's got posted journal entries behind the scenes, behind every single transaction that's posted. But you can create a correcting entry by clicking reverse it, which will do that very rapidly, and then you can create a new version of that invoice. I'll just tap escape to come back. As I scroll down on every transaction, journal entries, customers, vendors, we can store attachments, links, and notes. And when we click on attachments, if I click here, I can go ahead and attach files. So if it's an Excel spreadsheet from your accounting firm with closing entries that they want you to do, or a work paper for accruals, you can attach that document and it stays in the system, tracking the file type, the user, the date it was attached, associated with the system. So those types of transactions are there. We also have associated with our customers and vendors the contacts that work there. So I have a company record for the vendor, Graphic Design Institute, and then Bryce works there. So I can see the information associated with them. This is very useful because if I have to call Bryce to clear up something about a payment I've made, I have his communication information, his email address, his mobile phone number. So I can do this, and I have a list of interactions. So if I've had phone calls with him, if I've had emails with him, all of that data will be available under the interaction for the contact. And if I was to look at the company level, all of the interactions appear. So there was a purchase order sent, and that same cover sheet that I sent to Bryce is available. So same thing true on the customer side if you're using the relationship management side of things. So there's a lot of other details about vendors, customers. The system has fixed asset capability. So for tracking your equipment, unfortunately, I don't have any in this demo company, but we would have an asset description. It's the HP, Indigo, or whatever piece of equipment. And we can put in a fixed asset class and a subclass and enter the depreciation book. We can have multiple books, an IRS ledger, a company or book ledger, so that we can calculate the depreciation books, and we can manage maintenance. So if there's a vendor, is the service date, what's the warranty date? Is it under an insurance policy or under a maintenance contract? The beauty is when we have a purchase invoice, we can purchase a fixed asset and we can record, is it an acquisition where it'll be part of the depreciable basis, or is it a maintenance invoice, which will be tracked against the asset but won't affect the depreciable basis. Let's take a look at how we process payments. So I'll go into something called the payment journal. And a payment journal is a solution where we go through, and the first thing we do is prepare the journal. And when I click prepare, I can suggest vendor payments, suggest employee payments, net customer vendor balances. So if we have customers that are also a vendor, but when I run suggest vendor payments, the system's going to go through and find payments due through a certain payment date. And do I want to summarize per vendor? Summarize per vendor will create one line per vendor with a total dollar amount. If I don't say summarize, each invoice will appear on its own line. And when it appears on its own line, you can then partially pay, or makes it easy to remove certain invoices that we're not paying yet. Also notice that I just hovered and it's giving me the user manual basically for every feature in the product. And it's got this function from Microsoft called Ask Copilot. And if I click on Copilot, this is an interactive chat with Microsoft's artificial intelligence engine. Explain the field name, summarize per vendor. It's already working on it just by me clicking on that. And it's going to go through and it's going to link me to the documentation, but I can also ask questions. So it's got here some resources that will help, but if I can type down here and type in questions with just simple text, like, how should I set this? And just ask, and it's going to review information, understand what I'm asking, and then make recommendations to me. So it's built into the product, and Microsoft continues to do more with this. Now, when you're processing, you've told it to suggest payments, and it inserts everything that it's suggesting I pay. It's got the dollar amounts that I'm going to pay. I can partially pay invoices by just adjusting these amounts. And it's got the invoice information and that it's being applied to each invoice. If the check, once I go through and process the check, it'll mark that it's been printed. And that what's important is the bank payment type. And this comes from a default from the vendor record. Is it a computer check, a manual check, an electronic payment, which would be like an online bill pay type payment from the bank, or a wire transfer for an international transfer from that vendor? But as you run through these, as soon as you process a payment, it records a ledger entry. It wants to know that you printed a check with this check number, and it's a permanent record. But it can be voided. It hasn't had financial effect. It doesn't have a financial impact until we post it. And then the option is financially void, where it'll reverse that and put the money back into your bank. We have request approval. So the workflow approval function, once this batch is created for the invoices we're going to pay, and maybe we're not printing and getting a signature, we're going to send this directly to the bank, we would want to go through a process of getting an approval. So we'd send an approval request, and for the individual lines or for the entire batch. And once that is approved, then this can be transmitted to the bank, where we can go through and export this transaction, send that directly to the bank. If it's checks, we're going to print checks, maybe void checks, preview the check. But pretty nice to work with. It gives us a total for the number of lines and a total balance for anything that we're going to be processing as check payments or wire payments out. If I go to bank reconciliation is a popular feature used by a lot of our clients, and you'll notice Microsoft's got their artificial intelligence Copilot sitting here. And if I click on this function, it's going to say, all right, what do you want to do? I'm going to say, which bank do I want to use? Now, the bank has to have a statement import format in order for it to do it. But when I would choose that individual bank that I'm going to reconcile, the system's going to go through, and this is on the bank account card. It took me there because I don't have this import format. So I'd have to go ahead and choose that format or create a new one. But now that I go back, I'll choose here which bank account. And once I choose that bank account, it knows it's the only one with the bank statement import. And now import transaction data. It's going to go ahead and download the transaction from the bank. And ultimately, what it's going to bring up for me is a bank rec, where it's going to have all the bank account ledger entries, and it's going to compare them against the downloaded transaction lines. It will go through, and I can match manually by going and choosing line by line. I can match automatically, or I can tell it, go ahead and let Copilot do the work. So Copilot will match anything that it's an obvious match. And if it finds things that it doesn't match, like a bank charge or interest, it will suggest which GL accounts to post these to automatically. And it'll say, oh, that looks like interest income. You should use this GL account because it says interest income on your or bank charges or fees. And once you complete your bank rec, it obviously has to be in balance. Down at the bottom of the screen, it's going to give us our balance, and we have to have everything in balance. We go through and post the bank rec, and I gotta have a statement date for it to post, but this will go ahead and mark under bank ledger entries which transactions have cleared, and post difference to a GL account for things like fees. Let's take a look at a customer. And much like vendors, the lists can be in the similar fashion. But if I bring up a customer record, interesting information about a customer, we obviously have the information and their balance information set up, their contacts, their address, their invoicing rules, their tax area code. So if you do you deal with sales tax with any of your customers?
Unfortunately.
Okay. So if it's a couple of jurisdictions where you have Nexus, the system can handle it. We can create the tax area codes, the report to jurisdictions, the details about taxability and the calculation order and the percentages for each one, and the system can provide the reporting. However, you're setting that up manually. There isn't a download based on zip code or whatever tax information. So typically for clients that have a large tax Nexus, as Clients First does. We use Avalara Avatax, which is an integrated solution linked to Business Central, or we can link with Vertex. There's a number of tax agencies that we can use for creating, calculating, and updating the sales tax information so you don't have to deal with it. Payment terms, the default payment terms are established on a customer. The system supports prepaid discounts, like terms here are 1 month from the date of invoice, but if you pay within 8 days, you get 2%. You create and you construct your own rules for all of these payment terms. Bank communication, where we can choose a bank communication language. Statistics on the customer. So here's a little dashboard about a customer with money they owe us, money they owe in total. What's their credit limit? How much of their credit limit have they used? Are there past dues? What are the payments we've gotten this year? How many invoices have we had? There's been 22 for this dollar amount. Just, interesting statistics that I can see associated with a customer. When we look at the customer, I can enter information about their bank, and I can do direct debits as well. When I generate an invoice, I can hit their bank account. So if we enter their bank account information, I can enter all the info for their bank if they'll allow me to, with their bank branch and bank account number, and the system can do a direct debit when I process an invoice if they'll allow it. This is also where the system looks to see who did this payment come from when downloading transactions from the bank. Let's see. If I look at the customer ledger entries, so sometimes we want to dig in and review whether it's looking at journal entries or vendor ledger entries or customer ledger entries, customer ledger. And I drill down into that page. This is every transaction, every payment, every invoice that I've ever posted for every single customer. And this can be quite a large volume of data to drill through. So if I wanted to look at maybe invoices generated per month or payments I've received per month, I can do something called an analysis mode view. And once again, I can use Copilot to assist in creating this. And in plain language, I can say, show me payments by customer by month. And I click generate. And rather than taking this data and exporting it to Excel and creating a pivot table, the system will do this for me. So it's now built my information where it's got the customer, the number of transactions, and the sum of transactions per month, or payments. It's only payments it's including by choosing here what fields did I want to include, what were my row groups, and what were the values. And if I like it, I can say keep it, and it's going to save this value list. So that's payments by customer. There was one here, customer sales by month. And, it's got just the sales dollars for each of those customers by month. And I can drill down if I want to see any of these to see the details. If I wanted to see for this month, what were the total sales? I just highlight these, and just like in Excel, it's giving me the total sum, the minimum value, the maximum value, the count, how many records, the average. So pretty cool stuff just from working in Business Central. And this is simply running on a browser. I'm using Chrome right now, but you can use, a Mac. You can use, there's actually a tablet client, a phone client. I realize real estate's an issue, with the screen size, but that information's all there. Let's go and do some cash receipts. So I'll go to bank deposits, and bank deposits are where we record cash that came in. And I've got one set up in here. So if I open this up, you create a bank deposit and you'd put in what's the total deposit amount. And you can let the system roll that up and then put it in afterwards. You can tell it to post as a lump sum, and that will record one bank ledger entry. it's much better to have them post separately in case one of those checks bounces. Um, but then as we go to our lines, we choose a customer. Um, you can receive a refund from a vendor. Um, you can receive a refund from an employee or a reimbursement, but I'll choose a customer and I'll choose which customer is paying me. And I'll put in here what's their check number, which is the external document number. And now we go to a function called apply entries, which I can hit Shift F11. The whole system's designed to be keyboard friendly. And when I choose apply entries, it's going to bring me into the screen that I would apply any payments. And on this line, their invoice has an open balance of $4,133.16.92. If I go ahead and I hit Shift F11, it'll apply that amount by default. But maybe they partially paid, they paid $43.15 as an example, which would leave a balance open. But I've got here a payment tolerance, and the system will automate if we allow it to, based on setup options. Am I allowed to write off that difference directly and on the fly? And I'll go ahead and push OK, and it's going to bring the dollar amount back from their check, and it won't post until we're in balance. But this can be imported directly from the bank. If we've received a bunch of payments electronically, they are imported into the bank deposit screen. We can go through and do something called a test report. And the test reports are pretty much throughout most of the journals and most of the posting areas, where it will show me if there are any issues. So in this case, this won't post because I'm not in balance. My total deposit amount was only $21,21.70, but my lines were $6,436.70. You can't post. So, and it's warning me right here very clearly, total deposit must equal the amount. So I can go ahead and close out and update this amount. And I'll just put a 0 here and hit tab. And so now I can see the total deposit, which was down here as well, but makes it really user friendly, $64.36.70. And now I'd be able to post that deposit, which will put the amounts in on the customer, close out their invoices, and record my bank account ledger entry. Let's look at a journal entry. So when I go into my general journal, and there are general journal templates and there are recurring general journals for things like utility bills and maybe amortizations, any kind of schedule. When we open up a general journal, we can work in multiple batches, and you can put in a batch. You could have a batch for a user that's working in there. We can have something called a standard journal. So a standard journal, maybe it's the payroll entry, and that has all the GL accounts that I'm going to choose from the bank where the money's impounded from to all of the payroll expenses and direct costs applied. If I have a standard journal, when I go through here, we can also, under payroll, I can import from a payroll provider. So we can predefine the map of the file that I'm getting from ADP or whomever you're using for payroll, unless you want to put it in manually. You can have an incoming document and process an incoming document and create a journal from the file that you've imported. And if I go ahead and I'll just go back to home, I can put in a journal entry. So journal entries blank is just a regular general journal, but you can use a general journal to create a payment, an invoice, a credit, a finance charge memo, a reminder, or a refund transaction. I'm going to leave it blank because it's just a general journal, and I'll just put in a number. So now when I choose my account type, you can choose a customer, a vendor, a bank account. We don't do journal entries to the AR account or the AP account or a cash account. We do journal entries to the bank or to the customer or to the vendor, which in turn will hit the cash account or the AR account. This way, our subsidiary ledgers, our customer trial balance, our vendor trial balance, will always tie to the GL. Also critical with inventory, an inventory value. We don't do journal entries to the inventory account. We do adjustments to inventory, and that will hit the mapped GL account. But in this case, it's a journal entry to a GL account. And I'm going to say that I use some petty cash and what was my expense. And if this was a tax transaction where I have to record that information, I can. But in this instance, it was $100 and I paid for gasoline or something. So I have to search. So I don't even know if I have, let's see, gas, travel, I don't, miscellaneous. We'll just go down and I'll choose repairs and maintenance. So that's a one-line journal entry that will post. It's got my debit, it's got my credit, all on one line. Alternatively, if I didn't choose the balance account on this line, I'm now out of balance by $100. I would put the same journal on the next line, and here I would choose repairs and maintenance, that GL account. And on this line, I would put the debit, 100. And now, as I move off that line, I'm now in balance. This will post, but that's a 2-line journal entry. So you have a tremendous amount of flexibility the way you enter transactions and post them. We can also go ahead and share this. I can use a function called edit in Excel, but if I say open in Excel, it's going to push this data out to Excel. I can also highlight multiple rows and Control C, copy. And then if I go into, let's say, a new blank Excel spreadsheet, I'll drag this over here and paste. So it's copied and pasted all of the rows of data that I want to include in my journal entry. I can use this as a standard template for new journal entries that I bring in. For this purpose of this example, I'll just put in here minus 200 in this line and plus 200 on this line. And I wouldn't have US dollar and amount. I'd only have one of those columns displayed. But now if I copy and paste, so I'll highlight all the rows, copy, and I go back into my journal and I Control V, paste. It just put those lines in. So as long as you preserve the format, so line items on a purchase invoice, the body of a journal entry, any data set, you have that flexibility of just, copying and pasting, making it really simplistic. And once again, with any journal, we've got the test reports. I can also do something called preview post. Preview posting goes through the posted transaction and shows me what the resultant GL entries would be. So what GL accounts are going to get hit, what's the dates, what are the dollar amounts. This isn't a very complex entry, but you can see the information. So when you're looking at any posted transaction, you'll see all that information. And I'll just post this just to go through, and it posts the entry. It's done. It clears this out. And now I've posted journal entries in the system. Ultimately, and then we'll take a look at navigation, seeing transactions across multiple fields, and then I'll show you some of the reporting, the financial reports that the system creates. But if I go into a customer and I'll drill down into this customer's record, and I'll drill into the $118,000 we've sold them, and I'm in analysis view mode, I'll turn that off because I want to just see the list of transactions. And what if I want to see what was on this sales order? Sales order 101026. So if I go ahead and I click show document, it brings me into that posted invoice. So I can see exactly what was sold, Was there tax information? There was $120 in tax on this transaction. But instead of and I can correct it if there was something wrong, and which creates a reversing entry. It doesn't manipulate the posted document. But if I use find entries shows me all of the transactions that were created when this invoice was posted. And you can do this drilling. I wouldn't call it drilling down. It's drilling across from anywhere, from the
Right.
journal entry. So if I was on one of the GL entry lines and I clicked find entries, it's going to show me this same list. Here's the GL entries that were created. The sales tax accrued based on this, the accounts receivable, the inventory transaction. All of those details are here, and you can find them by clicking find entries. The tax entry, the customer ledger entry, the value entry, that's the item that was sold, and the direct cost of the inventory, the sales amount, which is our revenue amount, the cost amount posted to the GL. And it's very interesting. The cost amount of a transaction will carry through a cost and cost per unit based on the actual cost of production. So if there were raw materials consumed, and this depends on costing method, but if you're running things through your plant and there's raw materials, you thought the cost of those was $1,000, and you receive a bill from the supplier and they were $1,100, those costs will flow through and update the value of inventory and update the cost of goods sold. And it does that based on what's the current period that's open. If that invoice comes in next month, it doesn't go back and post in the closed period. It posts those additional costs on the first day of the current open period. How do we control that? Well, that's something we do through general ledger setup. And as part of the month-end process, we come into this field, allow posting from and allow posting to. So we'll go ahead and we'll say that, it's September 0901 through 0930. And I'm in an old work date because of the demo data in this, but that would have your current year. So the system will not allow posting in August or in October. And then, on October 1st, we're going to come in and change this. Now that's for all of the users in the system under general ledger setup. However, for you, because you might have to post adjustments to the prior period under user setup, you'll have the ability, it's not there, it's user setup. You have the ability to change for a specific user their own allow posting from. So you could leave it open for yourself for the whole year or whatever's appropriate in your actual instance. When we take a look at, you've seen a couple on-screen, financial presentations, but what about just a regular financial statement? So financial statements. And if we look at, they're called financial reports. And these are the predefined reports in the demonstration company. So balance sheet, income statement, statement of cash flows. They are based on what's called a row definition and a column definition. So the rows are, the rows on a report. If I say view this financial report, this is showing me on screen what it's rolling up. So each row has a row number and it has a mapping to what GL accounts are included on this report. And we go through and through definitions. If I edit a row definition, this is a mapping of the rows that would be included on the report. So you can choose which GL accounts you want included and build formulas in for the information that will be defined on reports. And you can choose individual accounts or you can choose account categories and show opposite sign and show in bold and do an underline or a double underline. And if you want information indented or tabbed or outdented, I think they made up that word, but we can create these row definitions. And then the column definitions that we're going to go through and create. So we can have a variety of column definitions where you can have multiple columns. This one only has the net change. But if we were to look at row definitions, these are the row definitions that are included in the example company. And if we look at, let's see, edit row definition for revenue analysis. I don't even know what it looks like. But so this has a bunch of, oh, it wasn't row definition. I wanted column definitions. These are the rows going down. So sales, income, job sales. It's just a statement of revenues in that example. But I wanted to show column definitions. And even though I left the N off, it found it. And if we look at like here, percentage of total revenue, year to date versus prior year to date, and if I edit that definition, it's got our current year, year to date, and it's bringing in the entries. It can bring in entries or budget entries if we've got financial budgets. And what is it? Is it the net amount? Is it the debit amount or credits posted to an account? And then we can set formulas. So this is a percentage of the total revenue. So current year to date, prior year to date, and current minus prior. And this is prior year. It's got a comparison date formula. There's just a lot of flexibility. It can be a little tedious to create these, but any kind of financial analysis report we can do natively. We can use Power BI, or we can just have these little, performance charts that can be generated. And we're going to teach you how to build all of these and how to use these in the tool.